Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. This video is part of the YouTube series that I'm making called Zero to Hero Business Central. In this series, I already uploaded few videos on my YouTube channel. In this particular video, we are going to learn about what is JSON, that is what is JavaScript Object Notation. Also, we are going to learn what is HTTP client, what is HTTP request message, what is HTTP response message, what are HTTP headers, and what is HTTP content. So first, let us actually understand about the JSON. JSON basically stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So basically, whenever we are sending information to other applications or external applications, we basically prefer to send the information in the form of JSON. Now, what is JSON? JSON is basically key value pair. So like for example, let's say name, I can say Tulasidas, and I can say age, you can say 25. Now, this is a JavaScript object notation, or this is JSON. So, JSON is basically key value pairs. So, we can understand like in Business Central, basically the JSON object type represents the JSON. So, if you see a JSON object, basically that means making the data in the form of key value pairs. And now let us actually understand what is JSON array. So JSON array is basically going to be an array which holds multiple values. Let's say I can say apple, I can say mango, and I can say like banana. So basically JSON array as a normal array holds multiple values. Now we can also use JSON array as a value. So if come to my JSON object, which is this one, we can call this as key and we can call this as value, because its JSON object is basically a key value pair. So this is a key and this is a value. Now here I can create one more key called fruits, and in fruits basically I can put a JSON array. That means I can basically put apple, I can put mango, and I can put banana. So this is what the JSON array is. So JSON array can be used as a JSON value. Now let us actually understand JSON value. First we will understand JSON value. After that we are going to go to JSON token. So here you can see JSON value. JSON value basically is this. I can say this as key and this as JSON value for this particular key name. Now let us actually understand what is JSON token. Now JSON token can be anything. JSON token can be a JSON object or a JSON array or a JSON value. So basically, let us say we have one JSON object. Let's say JSON object. Now I wanted to get the value of key name. So what I can do is I can just do JSON object dot get. I can pass the key, which is name. Now we think that we are going to get this particular value, which is Tulasidas. So that is right. We're going to get Tulasidas as a value, but the get is basically going to return as JSON token. JSON token. So here the value is basically represented as a JSON token. Now, if I wanted to get the values for fruits, for example, let's say if I do JSON object dot get fruits, right? Now basically what I am getting over here, again I'm getting a JSON token, but the token now represents the JSON array. So the JSON token can be anything. It can be JSON object, like for example if I have an object inside another object, like for example let's say fruits, and I can say this as one more JSON object. In here I can put like name, fruit name is apple, and I can say fruit age, something like that. I can put like 25, and I can close this basically fruits JSON object. I can put like fruits self life. I can say 10. So in here, if you see, this is the first JSON object, we can say, in an hierarchy, and this fruits is another JSON object which is basically inside this main JSON object. So let's say now I wanted to access the fruits JSON object. Again, we have to actually pass the fruits over here, and the return type of this get is again JSON token, but the JSON token now represents the entire JSON object. So basically, we are going to use this JSON object, JSON array, JSON token, JSON value in code as well while we are doing our coding. So do not worry about that, but just understand that JSON object is basically key value pair. JSON array basically holds multiple values. JSON token is basically can be anything like the JSON object or JSON array or a JSON value. Now the JSON value is basically a simple JSON value of a key. So this is what the JSON object, JSON array, and JSON token are. And now let us actually understand what is this HTTP client, HTTP request message, HTTP response message, HTTP headers, and HTTP content. So basically, whenever we are sending a request or consuming request, it is happening in between two applications or two systems. So let us say this is one system and this is another system. Let us say this is our BC extension. So we need to understand it in terms of BC extension because we are going to develop our business central extension. So we can call it as a client, and we can call this particular thing as server. So basically, client actually sends a request to the server, and server sends back a response to the client. Now here we can understand our business central extension acts as a BC client or a client which basically sends a request to the server and gets a response back to the business central extension. So basically, to represent this particular client, we basically have HTTP client. So by using HTTP client, we can send requests, we can receive responses. So HTTP client act as a client by using which we can send a request to the server or other applications other applications. Now let us actually understand what is HTTP request message. So we have HTTP client which is used for sending requests to the server, but we have to send a request, right? So that request can be called as HTTP request message. So here I can write HTTP request message. Remember, HTTP client is a type. Also, HTTP request message is a type in Business Central. So basically, we send HTTP request message to the server and we get HTTP response message. So we can say HTTP response message. So the request is basically HTTP request message and the response is HTTP response message. Again, these two are types which are available in AL. Now let us actually understand what are HTTP headers and what is HTTP content. So whenever we send HTTP request message, we also need to pass some headers. Like for example, what is the content type? Content type. Like, are we sending it in the JSON format or are we sending the content in XML format? So we need to define that in content type, and that content type is basically stored in HTTP headers, and this HTTP headers is connected to HTTP request message. So whenever we are sending a request message, this HTTP headers also send to the server. Now what is HTTP content? So basically, whenever we are sending HTTP request message, as we have seen with HTTP headers, we can also send some content. Like for example, let's say this is the server and this actually expects some data from the client. So that type of data can be sent through the HTTP content. So again, HTTP content is again connected to HTTP request message. So when we send the HTTP request message, along with the request, we can also send the HTTP headers. Also, we can send the HTTP content. Also, whenever we are receiving HTTP response message, we receive the response in the form of HTTP content. So, and we can also receive HTTP headers. So you need to remember that whenever we are sending HTTP request message, we can also send HTTP headers and HTTP content to the server. Also, whenever we are receiving HTTP response message, we can also receive HTTP headers and HTTP content. So we are going to see all of this in code in action as well, so do not worry about that. So that's all that I have about JSON object, also HTTP client, HTTP request message, HTTP response message, HTTP headers, and HTTP content. Do not worry about all this theory, because we are going to cover everything that we have learned in today's video in code in the coming videos. So do not worry about that. I'm going to explain each and everything in a very simple manner. As I said, I'll be uploading more videos in this particular series. So if you don't want to miss them, you should consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you.